My self-centered former spouse abandoned me and our children to pursue what she called true romance, only to later demand that I bankroll her new household, prompting me to deliver a firm dose of reality. Approximately 8 years ago, my marriage to my ex-wife Adibo collapsed soon after the arrival of our twins. Our time together hadn't been lengthy. We'd only been a couple for around 14 months when the pregnancy announcement arrived. Understandably, we panicked somewhat and figured perhaps we ought to remain together for the children's benefit. As often happens, people assume that bringing kids into the picture will magically repair a troubled partnership. To be frank, we weren't particularly well matched. We experienced some joyful times, yet the bond simply lacked depth or endurance. Once she became pregnant, I wished we could persevere and create something stable. In truth, however, we mixed about as well as oil and water. Nevertheless, for the twins' sake, we made a sincere attempt. Conditions were tolerable initially. Of course, we faced typical arguments like most couples, but nothing overly dramatic. We managed to make shared parenting effective, and relations stayed mostly calm. Then she encountered a new man whom she felt offered genuine potential. I understood. She sought a fresh start and a separate path. She was upfront about it, and we concurred that separation was wisest. I wasn't crushed. The base of our union had always been shaky regardless. We parted on decent terms and transitioned into a shared parenting arrangement. Matters ran reasonably well. We divided custody evenly, limited discussions to child-related topics, and placed the twins' welfare first. We committed to preventing personal conflicts from affecting the children, so we truly strived. Because we divided time and expenses equally, child support wasn't required. Roughly 2 years on, Adibo became serious with her current husband. Not the initial fling, but a different individual. It turned out he had a daughter around the same age as our twins. Adibo mentioned him and noted that the relationship was advancing. I aimed to encourage her in establishing a steady family setting for the kids, so I approved. Early on, it appeared acceptable. I assumed she simply desired a positive integration of families, but soon she began suggesting that I ought to regard her stepdaughter as one of my own. Make no mistake, I harbor no issue with her stepdaughter. She's merely an innocent kid in the situation. Yet Adibo started anticipating that I incorporate her stepdaughter into all activities with my twins. Initially, I politely clarified that although I appreciated the wish for harmony, I wasn't the step-parent in this scenario. I was already exerting maximum effort to excel as a father to my biological children. Regardless, she persisted in raising the matter. Shared parenting already demands careful balancing, and these impractical demands only complicated it further. Gradually, it began interfering with my periods with the kids. Each planned excursion or present turned into a discussion over whether the stepdaughter needed inclusion. I didn't object to occasionally bringing her along, but it grew into the standard expectation. I wasn't aiming to be obstinate. I simply opposed being compelled into a fatherly position for another person's child. As time passed, I observed that any unique gesture for my twins provoked upset if her stepdaughter wasn't handled precisely identically. On one occasion, she genuinely became upset because my gift spending on her stepdaughter didn't match what I'd allocated for the twins. That marked my limit. I chose to establish firm boundaries and concentrate my efforts and finances solely on my own children. I conveyed this to her, and naturally, she reacted poorly. She labeled me as self-absorbed and reluctant to aid the full family unit, but I had never agreed to this expansive, blended home vision she was imposing. I restated that my duty was to nurture and provide for my children. Following that, our shared parenting shifted toward parallel parenting. We adhered to separate timetables and ceased blending households. That simplified matters and enabled me to offer my kids focused attention without constant distractions. Still, Adibo would periodically revisit the topic, as if I were mistaken for refusing to parent every child in her residence. Her circumstances became more intricate. She and her husband welcomed a child of their own and subsequently cared for his nephew. Now her household included our twins, their stepsister, a relative-like nephew, and a half-sibling. She sought to bond them as a single large group, but I clarified that my parental duties ended with my twins, and then occurred the school excursion event. My children attend a compact school featuring multi-grade classrooms, so they share lessons with their stepsister and the nephew. It's an unusual arrangement, but it suits the institution. This excursion was a major highlight, an interactive museum adventure packed with practical education. My twins were thrilled beyond words, and I was glad to cover the costs. But upon informing Adibo, her response surprised me. She fell silent, then questioned why the other children couldn't participate as well. I assumed it was a jest, but she was entirely earnest. She maintained it would be unjust for solely our kids to go if their stepsister and nephew were excluded. I reiterated that I bore responsibility for our twins, not all youngsters in her home. I even proposed that perhaps she and her husband could secure funding if it mattered that much to them. But she pressed harder, arguing it would cause emotional pain to the others and harm their bonds with my twins. Her husband joined the conversation too, asserting I was fracturing the family. I directly asked him why it fell to me to finance children not biologically mine. He portrayed me as cruel for maintaining limits. They charged me with inflicting psychological damage and lacking compassion. I countered, explaining I merely wished to treat my kids to something nice without coercion to support another's family budget, but they refused to drop it. I eventually terminated the discussion, though I knew it wouldn't conclude there. Several days later, Adebo requested an in-person meeting. We convened at a local diner, and immediately I sensed it would be heavy. She began a lengthy speech about how this transcended a mere excursion. It concerned establishing lasting standards for equitable handling. She referenced upcoming trips, celebrations, and gatherings, proposing I begin contributing comparably for every child connected. I was incredulous at the audacity. She was basically requesting I subsidize her whole blended household. She employed the emotional harm perspective, stating disparity would foster enduring bitterness in the children. I steadily reminded her that only 2 among them were mine. She remained unsatisfied. She declared that if I genuinely cared, I'd back the whole family. At that point, her husband arrived, whether coordinated or coincidental, and participated. He blamed me for erecting barriers and acting unjustly. I informed him my duties started and stopped with the twins. He warned that any future estrangement among the kids would be my doing. I challenged him, noting he advocated this all-one family concept solely when accessing my funds. Finally, I'd reached my threshold. I stated that if they desired full equality, managing it was their task, not mine. I exited the diner exhausted, yet convinced I'd acted correctly. Yet the insistence persisted. Shortly after, her family members began contacting me. Her sister alleged I was undermining the children's joy. Her mother phoned and hinted that a true man provides for the complete household, regardless of biology. I politely dissented and ended the call. Then her brother posted a veiled dig online about authentic fathers. I removed it and proceeded. Even her husband confronted me at a child exchange to deliver another guilt-laden talk. I repeated that I answered for my kids, not others. It was draining. I confided in friends who were similarly shocked. One quipped they ought to launch their own crowdfunding if it was so vital. Ultimately, I recognized dialogue was futile. Thus, I resolved to solidify my limits without compromise. I spoke with my twins and reassured them the excursion was exclusively theirs, that enjoying it without guilt was fine. They beamed with anticipation, easing my stress immensely. I phoned Adebo and articulated everything clearly, courteously yet decisively. I informed her I'd keep fulfilling my role for the twins, but bore no duty for her remaining household. She attempted further guilt tactics, but I halted them and declared it conclusive. She concluded with a chilly fine, aiming to induce remorse, but it failed. The ensuing weeks brought welcome silence. No additional texts, no further demands, only tranquility. I devoted more meaningful moments to the twins, and the excursion day unfolded perfectly. Witnessing their delight reaffirmed my priorities. Then an unexpected development. Adebo rang the following day, not to dispute, but to state we disagreed, yet she acknowledged my resolve. It lacked remorse but offered recognition. Since then, interactions have improved. We may not align perfectly, but we've achieved a workable pattern. I've matured as a father, no longer second-guessing decisions. Enforcing limits revealed a vital truth. Rejecting others' demands can mean embracing personal serenity. A few weeks on, I believed it resolved until she raised the twins' accommodations at her residence. She claimed they lacked equivalent comfort there, and proposed I remedy it by acquiring a second residence. Indeed, earnestly, she anticipated I'd buy another property for their stays with her. She contended it would equalize standards and prevent the twins from sensing disparity between ease and hardship. I inquired if it was serious. It was. She maintained it pertained to the children's confidence. I replied resolutely, noting that if she deemed her home inadequate, addressing it fell to her and her husband. She retorted sharply, cautioning the kids might view my place as their true home. I offered no reply. That closed the exchange. I adore my children. I desire their optimum circumstances, yet I refuse to underwrite another's way of living. Currently, I've established the boundary and it stays fixed. She sought a house purchase from me for the kids, then escalated further. Thus, I pursued legal measures after rejecting her housing demand. I assumed that capped it. After all, what could surpass that request? But entitlement knows no bounds in pushing limits. A couple weeks passed. Conditions stayed peaceful. I relished moments with my twins, assisting homework, weekend activities, and maintaining positivity. The conflict appeared subdued. Naturally, peace is fleeting with boundary-disrespecting individuals. One day, the twins' school phoned to verify a supposed update to emergency contacts and authorized pickups. Evidently, their mother had filed paperwork designating her husband as a legal guardian for both, granting him authority for school decisions, retrievals, and conference attendance in my stead. I was floored. No prior consultation, no dialogue, Crucially, her husband holds no legal parental status. I contacted the school promptly and instructed them to ignore the alteration. I stressed unequivocally that solely she and I possess decision-making rights for the twins. After resolving that, I confronted Adibo. She feigned naivety, claiming it merely simplified logistics and involving her husband wouldn't harm. I declared unambiguously, it won't occur. These are my offspring. Her husband lacks any legal involvement in their lives, and choices concerning them bypass him. Full stop. She grew protective, accusing me of marginalizing her family and irrationality. But this concerned authority, not exclusion. And her blatant overreach. As though insufficient, it intensified more. A week afterward, an email arrived from her lawyer. Indeed, her lawyer. The subject evoked dread. Request to modify financial obligations and home equity for minors. Opening it revealed a catalog of claims. She now legally sought my contributions to enhance conditions at her residence, not standard child support. It essentially argued my financial position caused household disparity harmful to the twins' mental health. She demanded funds for housing improvements, transport costs for all her household children, and a recurring stipend for blending expenses. I was astounded. She'd shifted from misguided to outright manipulative. I consulted my attorney without delay. We examined all details and opted to shift from defense to offense. Initially, we submitted to officially codify our prior custody and financial terms via court. Previously informal, we'd managed amicably to evade disputes, but legal protections were now essential. Additionally, we sought a cease and desist on unauthorized guardianship claims. Her husband held zero rights to act for or represent my children, requiring formal documentation. Upon service of papers, retaliation followed as anticipated. She sent lengthy texts decrying my betrayal of trust, escalating to legal battle, and harming the children's prospects by opposing cohesion. I refrained from replying. Rather, I prioritized the twins. I explained suitably for their age that parental disagreements occur, but their security, joy, and love remain paramount. They needed reassurance, not details. Court arrived, charged with tension. Her attorney depicted me as detached and uncooperative, ignoring the children's extended family ties. My attorney presented solid proof, correspondence, texts, and records of my dedication. We highlighted unwavering support for my children, and no legal or monetary duty toward non-biological ones. The judge discerned the reality clearly. He decided for me, ratifying our existing custody and specifying obligations solely to my biological children. The equity motion was dismissed entirely. The husband's guardianship bid was denied, with a strict note that guardianship requires proper procedure, not assumption. As the session concluded, closure washed over me, absent for years. Legal protections now shielded the boundaries I'd defended solo. No more distortions or emotional leverage. It was freeing. Post-ruling, calm prevailed. No further equity talks, no family intrusions. The judicial outcome evidently conveyed my seriousness. Most rewarding, my twins appeared unburdened, carefree. The lingering strain vanished. They no longer navigated crossfire or guilt over differing homes. And myself, rest improved. Time with them grew purer, more vibrant, more significant. Drama absent, pure parenting. Ultimately, I discovered that effective parenting sometimes casts you as the antagonist in another's narrative. It requires unyielding stance against manipulation. It demands court intervention when needed to safeguard your children, mental health, finances, and tranquility. Should anyone imply prioritizing your own kids falls short, don't merely justify your stance. Secure it through law. If this tale resonated and stirred feelings, remember to like, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel for additional true-life accounts and touching narratives. Your engagement matters immensely, aiding delivery of similar stories. Thanks for viewing, and catch you in the upcoming video.